Hi, my name is Zan Chamberlain. Welcome to the American Numismatic Association Numismatic Theater. This morning we're going to have a wonderful presentation by Phil Nordin on cons and cash. Sarah?
Thank you. Well, welcome. And for you people who don't understand what cons and cash is, let me first introduce myself. I am a professor of criminal justice, and I use my collection of prison tokens in my regular classroom when I start talking about students that want to become correctional officers. I want to let them know what the society that they're going into has something to do with numismatics. So first of all, why cons and cash, or what do I mean that? Well, by having real money in a prison system, that permits people to purchase stuff that they normally would not be able to get. It's a society. Most of the time, they can't get outside and get any of the, top ramen or any of the sodas. So they're able to buy this at a commissary. But the way they're going to buy this is not using real money, because if they used real money, there would be some real issues about money. So they still want to be able to buy things from the fruit of their labor, but they just don't have a way to do it. We don't use real cash in prisons because there is a potential to bribe guards. There's a potential to use it against other inmates, and therefore they have not wanted to have this. They don't want to have it in because they've got a lot of good engravers who have been sent to prison. And so one of the reasons that if they had real silver or real money, then they would have some difficulty with engravers actually making it to use the bribery. They can also go ahead, if you have real money, you also allows people to feed themselves and start thinking about escaping. And for that part, they don't want to go ahead and have money available for them. So they quickly realized that they can't have actual legal tender that we know of, and as a way of using it in prisons. Now, gambling has always been a problem in prison. It is still a problem even with tokens, but it's less of a problem than if you had real cash. Now they've taken away tokens, but they still gamble in prison with cigarettes. And in California, they have just stopped them from allowing to have cigarettes in prison. So they're looking at chocolate bars as a way of gambling. There's always ways. Oftentimes you have problems with extortion of inmates who are more vulnerable, less worldly, less knowing what's going on in society. But as in all societies, prison has its own ideas and has its own methods of working. Now, prisons or jailhouse money, prison money was originally set up as a token, and it is there is a society of inmates. About 1970 to 1972, Irving Kaufman wrote a book about the society of inmates, in which you actually have a society. And if you think about this, where do you go get your laundry done? At home, or you might send it out to the dry cleaners. Well, there's no dry cleaners in prison. Where do you get your food? At the supermarket. But there's no supermarket at prisons. They have an entire society built into their lives. They go to the commissary for their extra food, but they're given food by the prison on 3 days. The morning they have a hot breakfast, lunch they have a sack lunch, and evening they have a hot meal. But if they don't want what they're cooking, then they go to the commissary. But like everything, it is a reflection of their society, just like our money is a reflection of our society. So let's compare. In our money, we always usually have a respect for God on our coinage. We have something that says, in God we trust. And we also have the emphasis on liberty. Normally you'll find this. And then of course you'll always find a date and a lot of respect for leaders. Always got somebody on our coinage that reflects back on a leader that we had a lot of respect for. And many of us, actually I don't, but a lot of people do. In token, there's no concern for dates. They don't know when they're going to get out. May never get out. So there is an exception to this, but in most adult prison institutions, when they were giving out tokens, there was never a date on it. They have, of course, a couple of exceptions. That one exception is, this one is Journal George Republic. This is a juvenile institution, William George in 1895 founded an institution for wayward boys, mainly. Had some girls there too. And it was his own society. People actually worked, children worked for these coins. In fact, if you didn't work that night, you didn't get your bed. You had to stay the day in jail in there. And this was in Freeville, New York. So the George Jr. actually did have a date, 1897, and the motto, "One for all," on the reverse. But in most of the prisons, we don't have dates. There is no concern for liberty whatsoever in prison. They may never get liberty. Of course, again, one exception is the National George Jr. Republic, 1899, and it mentions liberty exalts labor. Again, this is a juvenile institution. They are treated a little bit differently than adults, but no liberty on an adult. No reference to God. Never had, in God I hope we get out of prison. None of that. So that was never listed on a prison token. And there's no leaders or portraits in most issues. And again, we go back with George Jr., where he has, this is okay. We started out with tokens when we were looking at prison tokens. The earliest ones I found were right at the beginning of the 1900s. And then we went into scrip, and not quite sure when scrip took over and tokens were eliminated. Then into coupons, coupon books specifically. And now in most prisons, especially San Quentin, they have e-transfers, which is electronic transfers. Again, this is a reflection of our society. We've gone to coinage to, many of you may bank by an e-transfer. So it does reflect the society and the change of society. You can't find any more prison tokens being used in prisons now. They much more rather to go to an e-transfer or it's like a Scantron. Hi, Greg. So how does a token start? How do you go about getting a token? Well, in 1962, Mrs. Henry deposited into Prisoners Trust Fund $1.35 for prisoner 469. No name, all prisoners have numbers. And certainly this was one that, he didn't get a lot from Mrs. Henry, but we don't know what he was able to buy from either out of the commissary. But this was at the Department of Justice. This was the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And he was able to go ahead and then get that money out in the form of a token. So what is out there? How do you know if you even got a prison token when you're looking through? The Bible, the one I used, the one I first came up with is by Jerry Zara. Jerry Zara was a correctional officer in New York and started collecting prison tokens as well as prison postcards and prison memorabilia. And all of the tokens that are listed in there, and he is the expert on this, you'll all see they'll have a Z. That's what they're associated with, the Z's for Zara. And this was the book that I finally got and started to look for, and I've marked my book up pretty well. What I also recommended and I started doing was at the same time that I collect prison tokens, I collect prison postcards. Now, who wants to take a picture of a prison? They take it all the time of San Quentin and Alcatraz, but they actually have really proud of their prisons in most of the states. And so you can find these if you look through. And we belong to a postcard club, and sometimes I have people helping me find them also. This was a way of collecting. Now, if you want to collect prison tokens by states, you'll have a complete collection if you collect Montana, because they only had one token and it was never released. So, ta-da, you are a full-time collector and you've got one. So that's kind of exciting. I was able to get that. When I looked in the Zara book, it was like, you got it. You can stop now. You don't have to collect anymore. Now, if you really want to give yourself a challenge, collect Michigan. They got 267, counting some more. We're still finding some out there. And this is a postcard of Michigan. Now, this is the entry. This is not where the prisoners live, believe me. But this is the entryway to their prison. So they kind of got a nice jolt when they walked in and said, oh boy, palm trees, this is going to be beautiful. When they walked through the hall and went down the cells, it didn't look like this at all. But this is, again, a postcard of what the Jackson, Michigan prison looks like. J. Allen Company, and he reads that when he first set it out, he realized he had a misspelling of Richmond, so these were never circulated either. So this is an uncirculated transportation token, but San Quentin never had prison tokens. San Quentin is the oldest prison in California. It was started in 1854. It was originally a hulk, a ship that had been abandoned in San Francisco. For the gold miners, when they came, they brought their ships in, they just abandoned them, and they took off to the hills. They went ahead and they wanted instead to bring it over and put it in Angel Island, but there wasn't any good area to dock. So they went ahead and they brought it over to Point San Quentin, and they docked it. And they had a woman on prison. There was 2 women in prison already on the ship, along with 34 men. And by the time they got it out there and they docked it, it was already overcrowded. So they never used prison tokens. They built San Quentin by hand, all the prisoners did, with a quarry that was up behind San Quentin. Now, this is a wooden dollar at face value. Again, this is a Z, it's listed in Zara as the San Rafael bus line. This time they got Richmond spelled right, so they used this. But we found this in the Atwood. He's the transportation token expert, and we found it in his book and also in Zara's book. Now, Phil's going to step in here now because he can help out with a little bit more of the different types of prison tokens that I've been collecting.
Well, don't feel for a moment that the field has been completely covered on the issues of prison tokens. There's quite a number of unlisted and unrecognized pieces out there. And one of the reasons for us being here today is to bring you up to date as to what Jerry Zara's book covered some 30-odd years ago versus what we're finding out there in the real world right now. One of the formats that we've noticed with Iowa has been that the prison tokens were very poorly recognized with the exception of Anamosa. However, there is a format and there's a formula. Once you recognize this formula, you can take it to the Bourse floor with you this afternoon. Watch for DOC. As you're looking through your Mavericks and as you're looking through the dealer's junk boxes, they may not recognize the fact that DOC stands for Department of Corrections. Iowa used a very similar format for a lot of their pieces. DOC at the top, 3 stars on the obverse left, obverse right, the word token across the middle, and the name or the initials of the facility below it. Once you know this format, you too will be able to go out and find discovery pieces. We found these 2 without too much trouble in an afternoon in a local coin show in Fairfield, California. Perhaps $5 a piece for them. And because of this, we're able to look for pieces that simply haven't been looked for before. Realize this point, and you too will be able to find some. Now here's some other ones, and I'm going to have to step back to the microphone on this because we may have a little glitch here.
We do.
We do, indeed. Used tokens that normally have the obverse that you see on the top, and the reverse is the state of Illinois. Pardon me for just a second here. This one isn't talking to the projector very well. Okay. And let's see if that will put it back online. I heard a click.
No, bring it down.
Okay.
Now click on it.
In which both sides were struck with the obverse die. It's an obverse mule.
Let me try it, see if I can work it.
And if the streaming video had worked, you would have seen that she was able to turn the piece over and you would have seen an obverse on both sides. We joke about 2-headed coins being magician's coins or whatever. This was an actual, are we going to get this to work now?
No, I'll try it one more time. No.
It doesn't like this particular setup. Technology is great until something breaks.
There it goes.
Hey!
See?
Like the space shuttle. Keep trying, sooner or later you will persevere.
I'm going to do it again, just so if you missed it, you can see it again.
Obverse, obverse. Streaming video on a laptop, whether it wants to or not.
Okay, that's enough. Let's go on.
For our next trick, we'll try to go to the next screen.
All right.
Very good. For a number of years, Chippewa, Michigan. I remember Michigan, 260-something and counting. It's like a little odometer that keeps running. We understood that Chelsea, Michigan only had two known tokens, 10 and 25 cents. Zara was calling them Michigan 11 and Michigan 12. Again, just a few years ago, in another local coin show, Sarah was digging through a box and came up with the 5-cent piece. Completely unknown, completely unrecognized. There are 4 known pieces so far. She found 2 of them in 5 minutes' time.
If you find the other 2, call me.
At any rate, you're seeing 25% of the known population right here. That's better than the 1913 nickel.
Okay, you guys switch.
This is my wife's absolute favorite token, so I'm going to turn this one back over to her because she has some stories to tell you involving blood and money.
Sorry about this. I'm wired most of the time, but that's only because I have a lot of caffeine in me. Okay, Parchman, Mississippi. If any of you have ever gone to Mississippi and seen Parchman, it's not the nicest place in the world to visit. Most southern, I'm not saying all, but most southern prisons were farm prisons. Prisoners went to work on a farm. It isn't like Sing Sing, it isn't like San Quentin or Folsom. They were actually working out on a farm, and it was very poor. And the only way that you could get this particular token was if you gave a pint of blood. That was the only way you could get it. You couldn't work for it, you had to give blood. So it was called blood money. This was, when I got this, I was excited. And so my students are very excited. I pass it around and show it to them, and I say, you only could have gotten this. And this was the highest denomination in that particular prison, was 50 cents. Some prisons go up to $5. This one goes up to 50 cents. So it was very poor. But it's pretty interesting. And I just got a book about Parchman, and it's not a pretty sight. Didn't go well. In Sing Sing, we talked about Sing Sing, they had a lot of unique ways of handling prisoners. And one of them was in 1913, the warden at the time decided to give over the running of the prison to the inmates. They went on their own government. And he started the Mutual Welfare League, which was in all of their coinage. Now, the first 2, and we have it over here in our exhibit, the first 2, the 1 and the 5, and Phil, you're going to have to pop in here on this, but whether or not I can give it to you. The first 2 were, the first coinage was different than what the second one was. So here, go ahead and put you on. But this was unique to let prisoners have their own government.
And this is a situation that Sarah has discovered just recently. The Sing Sing tokens have been around, as she says, for almost 100 years now, 1913 and beyond. And at the same time, we realized very shortly that there were at least 2 different strikings of them. The Zara book talks about a variety on the 25-cent piece. This was a die variety that they've noticed. Sarah noticed that there's also a difference in the orientation of the tokens. The first series was struck not with coin orientation, heads, tails, but with medallic orientation, heads, heads. The second variety, second striking, didn't include the 1 cent piece. They didn't do that one. And they changed the 5 cent to an aluminum piece. And all these tokens are struck with coin orientation, heads, tails. We know this because the 25-cent piece is the giveaway. It has a die variety. Either the 25-cent piece was a real workhorse and they had to make a new die for it, or there was simply some problem with that particular obverse die. And because of this, we were able to follow through and recognize that there are 2 different strikings of these tokens, medallic and coin. We have both sets over here. As far as I know, there's only one other set known. complete sets, so you're having a chance to see something that it took us quite some time to put together.
Right.
And it also reflects the fact that by simply looking at what you have, it's quite possible to discover new things. The more you look, the more you discover.
And finding things from the East Coast on the West Coast is even harder. So finding this from Sing Sing and getting a complete set was a challenge. Now, Nevada is well known for its prison and for its prison tokens. But this was an unlisted piece that I was able to find. It was listed in Schilling and Dunn. It was not listed in Zara. And I was really concerned when I saw this. And then I realized that it was unique because it had the cent sign inside the $5, and the signature was on the reverse, which is normally not the case. So this was another unlisted piece that I was able to get into my collection, was kind of exciting. Now, besides buying stuff from the commissary, you also could buy Coke. And this was given to you in Wisconsin, and you see the Coca Cola logo. That had to have been approved by the Coca Cola people to be able to use that. And they also went ahead and used it as an unlisted piece, again, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So Wisconsin was a Coke place, which I personally like Coke. And most people like Pepsi or Coke. You don't like them both. So I wouldn't mind going to prison in Wisconsin had I been able to get my Coke. Now again, this was a token that was only redeemed for Coke. But in Colorado, their Coke wasn't even with the logo. They just used Coke. And so it was kind of like, well, that's kind of plain. And lo and behold, about 3 months after I got this, I got one Colorado for candy. So they could make their own tokens and put this wherever they wanted on the back, depending upon what they wanted to sell out at the commissary that year. So you could either get Coke or candy. Again, this is another unlisted reverse. Zara didn't have it. So I'm beginning to think that possibly we need to update Zara. And I might try that in my spare time. Colorado, a few years later, got out of the Coke business and went into the Pepsi business. They wanted to be fair. And this is another option where you can also you can see how it changed from Coke 1 year to Pepsi a few years later. So you can also buy that as a token. You can look for that. So if you look at Coke tokens, look on the other side, you might have a prison token. Jails are different than prison. Jails, you are only in jail, supposed to be only in jail for up to a year. So all of a sudden, we find some jail tokens show up with dates, which kind of maybe gave them some hope. Hey, you're going to be out in 1985. But this was unique because it had the exact place where it was, it had the date, and it had 5 cents, and it was square. And I thought, what an unusual looking token. And I got kind of excited. Many jails don't have commissaries. They just don't have any place. If you want to have something brought into you, you get your family members to bring it in. But they don't have commissaries. So to be able to have a commissary in jail is pretty unique. And I thought that was kind of fun. Other jail tokens. This is different. It looks like the reverse was kind of maybe it was a generic 5, because the 5 is totally different than the obverse. And it's a little bit more ornate. And this was the Hamilton County Jail, and underneath 5 jail, and underneath that is the actual name of the person of the company who made these tokens. It's not the warden, or it's not anybody who was in the jail, it was not the sheriff or anything like that. So this was another jail token that I was able to pick up. Now, Hanna Center for Boys is in Sonoma, California. It is still an ongoing institution. And they were able to get these tokens to also use in the commissary. But the boys were never allowed to put anything in their pockets. So all of these have holes in them so that they could wear them around their neck. And that's how they were able to get things out of the commissary once they worked. Now, I don't know if the Hanna Center for Boys worked the same way that the Georgia Junior Republic did, but if you didn't work, you didn't get food and you didn't get bedding. So if that was the way it worked, these were important and they had to keep track of them. We go to scrip now, and Phil's going to talk about this is from Sing Sing, and I have these 2 in my collection, but they're really unique because of the way they were found.
Not only found, but the condition that they're in. When you find Sing Sing tokens, for the most part, you will find them well worn. Fine to very fine is about the average run. The exception on this is the 50-cent piece. When you look at the exhibits in the case, you'll notice the 50-cent piece is probably an AU or better, and that's typically how they come. Those pieces did not see much use in inmates' pants. Neither did the folding money. Many cases, you'll find the 1s and the 5s in crisp uncirculated. These things never made it into the cells, folks. It's very clear that they spent their time in the administrative office. Prisoners were not allowed to keep more than a finite amount of money, and by looking at this, we can suspect that $1 was probably about the upper limit. If a prisoner had accrued more than $1, this would be translated into paper money, put it into the inmate's account, and left there in the administrative office. Hence, the money never really saw very much circulation. We know of a 1 and a 5. Those are available. They're not common by any stretch. My wife and I have seen a $10 note from Sing Sing on eBay once, so we know it does exist. And there is a postcard from Sing Sing which shows the different money. It shows a $20 note. We've never seen it.
Zara says it doesn't exist.
Zara suspects it doesn't exist.
Right.
It may have been an essay, and that's as far as we've ever seen one.
And he lived in New York, and he had access to Sing Sing. And if you have access to museums of these prisons, that's where you'll find a lot of stuff that they had. And he never showed up. If I ever see a 20, oh my gosh.
So if you see one on the bourse floor this afternoon.
Yeah, if you see something, please let me know.
Catch us at the banquet tonight.
Yeah. In the county jail, and this was called the Bridge of Sighs. And basically the story was they would go from the courthouse to the jail and go because of the high sentences they got. So all of these, especially in the older postcards that you see, the Bridge of Sighs, normally are associated with jails because they transport them right over there. They don't, like they do here, transport people to prison and then send them out to the other prisons. This was the canteen service. You were actually given a booklet when you became an inmate, and then you also were, those were the denominations from 1 cent to $1. They were not transferable. If you left the jail, you had to give them in. You couldn't take them out with you. So to get these is kind of unique. They all had serial numbers, and those were assigned to the specific inmate. So they were kind of hard to pick up. Inmate scrip changed color, and it also would change the serial numbers. They changed color to keep from forgeries being made in the jail or in the prison. And this is one from Arizona, and as you see, it's got void on all of it. They were assigned to a specific inmate by serial number, and they only were allowed to exist for a short time, and then they were out of circulation. So again, 1 cent to 25 cents. Not a lot of money going on in jail. Now, if you also, back in the 30s and the 40s, if you wanted to go to the cinema in prison, you had to earn it, and they'd give you this one token, this one script, and you could get in. And again, it was, it was a colored one. This is the only one I have. If I see another one, it's probably from a different date, or maybe that was all they ever had. Not every prison had a cinema. Then if you wanted to get your hair cut, you would pay 5 cents at the Ohio State Reformatory. This is an actual picture, not a postcard, of inmates having their hair cut by other inmates. And this was done, and this is still being done in prisons today. You don't have a barber in the prison, you have an inmate who is a barber in the prison. Hopefully you haven't done something wrong, because if he's shaving you, okay. So now, my expert in errors will talk about this particular one. I think this is a fun one.
Well, I'm a recovering CONICA member, so you'll pardon me if the lexicon gets a little skewed because of that. Errors are very unusual among prison tokens. I don't think it reflects anything in the manufacturing process. I think it reflects the population of error of the pieces themselves. There's so few prison tokens out there that the population of errors will be very small. So small to the point that even a minor off-center such as this is something to get excited about and bring to A&A and show you. Now, I should warn you, there is a dealer on eBay at this time who will occasionally put out a Kentucky State Reformatory piece, and he will advertise it as an error because the K is cut backwards. Well, folks, the legends on the obverse and the reverse of this piece are the same thing. What this dealer has done is he has turned the piece over and he's photographed it so that the K is properly backwards, and he's selling it as an error piece. And if you see it next time, bookmark it, watch it, and see what kind of silly prices it commands. I get a laugh every time I see it. On the other hand, this one is a bit more interesting. Remember our references to Michigan and how this is such a fertile ground. If you're interested in doing any token research, the Michigan prison tokens are an excellent way to go. Kinross was one of the most prolific. Is that a good? That's probably the best word to use.
It was the first one I got from Ken Ross. It was 50 cents. And I thought, okay, that's
first
exciting.
One she ever got. It's also produced probably the most number of varieties of tokens and also the sheer volume of tokens. Sheer volume means more opportunity for errors. And because of that, we were very proud about 2 years ago to pick up this full-blown mirror brockage piece. And notice the quality of that one. This one was definitely a winner. And it's the only brockage we've seen among prison tokens.
Right. I've never seen another one after that. But that was kind of exciting. Another bridge of size. This is the Tombs. And this has got a counter stamp over on the right-hand one. And it is actually, they're not sure what it's from. It could be void, could be V for void. It could be V for Valentine. That was the name of the warden at the time in the city prison. But it also has a hole in it, and it comes because people probably had to keep it around their neck to keep it at the city prison in New York. So that's another error. South Carolina State Prison, this is one of my more interesting ones, except when I got it, I didn't know what I had until Phil said, oh, it's an inverted center. This is a plastic one. It's a discovery piece, and it's the only one I have with an inverted center. And for plastic, that's kind of unusual. You would have thought they would have discarded it.
If you're a philatelist, you know all about inverted centers. You can tell me the story practically by heart of the flying upside-down airplane. If you are a numismatist, inverted centers are very unusual because most pieces, most coins and most tokens are all stamped at one time. However, the die that produces them may be made in different stages. And South Carolina chose to keep the same perimeter legends for its 5, 10, 20, and 50-cent pieces, and then they simply changed the denomination in the middle. In this one instance, the 10-cent was inverted when they placed that in, made the die, and then produced the pieces out of this brand new high-tech substance called plastic back in those days, which may have been such an unfamiliar substance that we may have had some production problems there to begin with. When we first found these, we found 2, and Sally has exhibited them, has talked about them, has published about them. So far, 2 more have come up. So at this point in time, here in 2005, the surviving known population is 4 pieces. I'll bet there's more out there. Check for them this afternoon on the bourse floor if you have a token dealer who's a favorite one of yours. Don't just pass over the prison tokens. Check for South Carolina. See if you can see one. I'll bet we can find another one today.
Cool. So we were looking again on eBay, which is where I sometimes find something, and I thought, boy, this looks very familiar. Vacaville has these types of coupons, and I went, let me buy it and see what's going on and do some research. So I bought it and then really researched. There was never an Oroville State Prison, never. It could have been used for a movie. It could have been used for something else, but it's a fantasy list, and it was unlisted. But it looks just like the one in Vacaville, California. So I figured, well, they may be, we looked all over for the prison in Oroville that doesn't exist. Okay, how do you collect these? If you want to collect them, you can go either by prisons, by jails, by state. Start with Montana, and you'll be a winner. By scrip, by coupons, or just by trade tokens or good for. You can collect them any way you want. I was basically just thrilled by the fact that I can bring these into my classroom and show my students, my college students, what's out there. And most criminal justice teachers who I show this to have never heard of these because they're not in any books about criminal justice. They're in some books that list some type of payment, but not specifically tokens. So I was really excited when I saw this. And before I completely go into questions or leave, one of the things I just picked up was from Arizona, because I always try to bring something in, from Arkansas rather. This is one of the prison whips used in the prisons in both, and we have the prisons, there's 2 prisons. There were farm prisons in Arkansas, and these were both in. If you've ever seen the movie Brubaker, that was actually, with Robert Redford, that was actually one of the things they showed. So this is an original one. When I pass it around to my students, I say, is that blood or is that rust? And I went, I don't know, whatever you think. So this is what I give them along with the prison tokens. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, were these unused tokens upon the inmate's release, were they convertible to cash?
Whatever they had in their, yeah, they could be converted into cash. Whatever they had left in their account, they got. And if that was tokens, if let's say they had 25 cents or 30 cents, they'd give those in cash too. Yeah, they kept them in the prisons. Great.
Yeah, what's the common pricing for prison tokens? I mean, are these very expensive,
No.
inexpensive, broad range?
Broad range. You know, I mean, Ken Ross, you can go in and check anything and you can get a Ken Ross for 50 cents. But, you know, it also depends upon, see, I like the ones that are the most worn because then I know they were the most used in the prisons. But then some of the paper money is difficult to find because those were torn and they weren't used. Some of the coupons were torn out and never used, and you know, they're paper, so they don't have the lasting ability like the metals do. So it could be anything. I mean, if you find some unlisted ones, you're not going to know how much to pay for them, but it's not thousands of dollars or anything like that. It's maybe a couple of hundred is the most you'll pay for one, the rare ones.
And when we're talking rare, we're talking pieces that come, for example, from the Alcatraz Correctional Facility. We're talking about pieces that have connections to other areas of numismatics. Prison token collectors don't seem to be willing to spend a lot on their pieces because it's more of a hobby, it's more of an interest. You'll never see one slab that I've ever seen. You'll never see price guides for them. And because of this low-profile nature of this corner of the hobby, the commercial interests haven't quite caught up with this yet. Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.